Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's conversation with paper engineer and graphic designer Kelli Anderson and curator Camilo Otero. My name is Andre Martins. I'm the audiovisual manager and a member of the programs team here at SNFL. Before we start, I'd like to thank the Stavros Niarchos Foundation for making programs like this evening possible. I'd also like to remind you that if you don't already have a library card, it's easy to get one by visiting any information desk in this building. Finally, I'd like to encourage you to visit NYPL's website and take a look at upcoming 7 Stories Up programs like this one. We have an excellent lineup featuring new fiction, nonfiction, music, local history, and more. We'd love to have you join us in this space again. And now let me introduce tonight's author. Kelli Anderson is a graphic designer, paper engineer, educator, and author who uses design magic to connect people with hidden talents of everyday things. Her previous publications include This Book is a Camera, which transforms into a working camera, and This Book is a Planetarium, which houses paper devices, including a planetarium, and has sold more than 100,000 copies. Without further ado, please welcome Kelli Anderson and Camilo Otero.
Thank you all so much for coming. Camilo and I worked on an exhibition at the Center for Book Arts about the topic in this book before this book existed. And so can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, well, thank you, Kelly. Thank you for having me here today. So I'm the exhibitions and publications manager at Center for Book Arts. It's a nonprofit. We've been around for more than 50 years, dedicated to the book as an art form. And we're very close by. We're on 27th Street between Broadway and 6th Avenue. And among our programs, we have an exhibition program, and we had Kelli back in 2022.
I don't even remember now.
I think it was
so long ago.
Fall 2022. We had Kelli show Abracadabra, letterform.
Type and technology.
Yeah, letterform technology. And this was a show that I would say that tested in some way many of the elements that are present in the book.
Yeah.
In a more like immersive sort of way. So you set up different sort of devices and pieces, for instance, like we're seeing now in this video, where people could interact with the different materials. And so it was more like walking through the book.
Yeah. So we're going to tell you a little bit about that, show you a little bit of my work and Camilo's work. Then we're going to talk more about the book and end with some Q&A. So if there's anything that you're like, how did they do that? That doesn't make sense. I need an answer to this question. Like, put it in your back pocket because we are going to do some Q&A. My name is Kelli Anderson. I would spend 100% of my time hanging out in my apartment making little cardboard protest signs if it were up to me. But fortunately, I got this book out before the entire world collapsed. So I'm doing more things. And I work as a graphic designer, so I also do client work. Has anyone ever been to Russ and Daughters and gotten like a bagel and lox? So I did all of their branding and menus and oddly, the architectural design in their cafe, because they were like firing their builders. And so I like mocked it up in Photoshop and then we built it, which is wild, but it worked. But my favorite thing to do is, take graphic design out of the second dimension and bring it into the third dimension and make these like interactive books. So this is a philosophical pop-up book that I made for Apple computers to broach the topic of critique with their engineers that didn't want critique. So this is kind of like, it's really important to step into other people's shoes as a pop-up book. But I've also made a book called This Book is a Planetarium, which takes different technologies that we assume have to be digital, electronic, silicon-based, and pares them down to their bare paper minimum. So people can have these interactive experiences with things like encryption or sound, or, they can project light on their ceiling and have a planetarium in their room. And the whole purpose of this book is to, make the world more accessible in a way. We have so many black box technologies, so just a little, paper inroad into like understanding like how these concepts work that undergird everything. I also have a book called This Book is a Camera. Really into these literal titles. Like if anyone needs me to help them like give away the end to their murder mystery novel, I can help. And this one works as a functional camera. So the way it does that is you have to put, the secret is photo paper. So you have to go into the dark and put in some photo paper into the back. And then when you lift up the dark slide, it exposes the photo paper, and then you have to develop it in instant coffee, baking soda, and water, which is like a really old developer recipe. But yeah, I mean, it's fun to make your own photos. Has anyone ever made a pinhole camera before? Oh, did it change your life? Everyone's like, yeah. Very cheap entertainment, folks. Cheaper than a Broadway show. So yeah. And who are you, Camilo?
So I'm Camilo Otero. As I mentioned, I work at Center for Book Arts, but I also have a publishing project with my partner, Eva Parra, who's with us tonight as well. And basically, we have a publishing project called Calypso Press, and we work with mainly with visual publications like drawings and photographs. And yeah, we started in Cali in Colombia in 2015, and this was our studio at the time. And we've had several projects with artists from Latin America, and we presented, for instance, this is an image of a sketch for the future, a project we presented at Miriam Gallery in Brooklyn a couple years ago. For instance, we also made a project with Adam Green, publishing
Moldy
his
Peaches
chapbook. And so that's mainly our publishing approach. But at Center for Book Arts, where I'm curating and also managing many of the exhibitions, we're really centered on the book as an art form, and also surveying the history of artist publications since the 1950s until today. And I think in that sense, Kelly's work goes in line with that historical legacy of artist publications that think about the book as an ongoing as a time-based media. And yeah, a few of the questions that I have for Kelly today are regarding precisely that, like working with the book not only as a container of words, like Ulises Carrion would say, but as a device that thinks about itself at the same time that is, unpacking or unfolding information or artworks. Finally, I curated a show at Penumbra. These are it was an exhibition on photo books and made with risograph, because our press is mainly focused on riso. So it was an approach to working with a medium that is usually not used for photographs. And I guess in that line of what I was saying before about this historical legacy, our next show in the summer focus on this set of concrete poetry, where we're going to be showing a series of publications published between 1965 and 1968. And we're actually going to ask Kelly to participate in the show.
You hinted at that, but I don't know the details yet, so
yeah,
that's very exciting.
We're in the works, so.
So our last collaboration was on this show at the Center for Book Arts. Letterform Technology, that was the name of the show. I almost forgot. The idea is that letters are magic. They are these impossibly small containers for history that you can look at a letter form and see the history of the world in microcosm. So that was kind of the premise of the show, which is kind of like a big thought to live up to in like a very small exhibition space. So yeah, that's this is what people saw when they walked in, and it really was kind of like a shoebox-sized gallery. But we packed in. You could probably spend like 4 hours here, just like looking, and people did. People would come and like look at every single thing.
Yeah, interacting, working, reading,
breaking the things. And that was the opening. It could have been a super spreader event, honestly. That was fun. But yeah, so, the idea behind the exhibition as well as the idea behind the book is that we're all somewhat literate. You can look at these like Romanesque arches and see, that the philosophy of the person who built that is very different than the person who built a Gothic cathedral, right? And the person who built the Gothic cathedral was thinking about something very different than the person who built like a modular 1960s like apartment building. And so, we have programs in colleges where you can get a degree in architecture history, art history. But the same attention, I feel like, hasn't been given to letter forms and type. And yet, when you look at these ho's, this is by Aldo Novarese, you can really be transported to those same places with this very, very minimum of, information. Like there's a lot less going on with the letters HO than there are with a Gothic cathedral, and yet the same sort of like transporting feeling takes place. And so I've been really interested in like, how does that work? Like this tells us something amazing about ourselves, about human perception, and then also tells us, something amazing about like the history of letter forms. I feel like this quote by Garrett Nordsey really sums it up well, that he says, typography is a good model for observing perception because it has these strict rules and it creates this artificial laboratory-like space that everyone has within their reach. There's definitely a lot of light and space artists that like play with these ideas of perception, but as a type designer, graphic designer, you can also play with that like on the page and really get into perception. So yeah, we created this very ambitious exhibition, which was essentially like filled with typographic toys. And so this table that people are playing with here, this is it shows how anti-aliasing works. I think I have a better video of it coming up. All of the different typographic toys were accompanied by essays that came in these dispenser box. It works like the paper towel thing in the bathroom. So you take out an essay and then the next one comes out. Theoretically, sometimes they got stuck. But these were all printed on the Riso. We also had, these were really fun. This was problematic because it was hard to cut them off. But this was a study of how certain typefaces appear on album art over and over and over again through the decades. So we studied Amelia, Countdown, and I can't even remember what the third is now, but we had like a little record store of these typefaces and people could take tape off. Yeah, so this is that interactive, I think this was the best thing in the show in terms of like people understanding how to use it and what it was about. Yeah, so, when digital screens came about, everything was either a pixel that was black or a pixel that was white. And so you had this like stair stepping. It's kind of a cool aesthetic. It reminds you of like Pac-Man, early arcade games. But at some point, people said, oh, we want the letters to look like the original typefaces again. And so this technology of anti-aliasing, where you add this like grayscale feathering around a letter form to like soften the curves and soften the diagonals, is something that happens on all of our computer screens and phones all the time. And so this table was like, how does that work? How can I challenge myself to make this like nice double-decker G? So there's just a lot of things like that where, it's interesting. It explains how we got to now. It explains why typefaces look the way they do. It explains how our world is built. But it's like so technical that it's hard to get people engaged in it unless it's a toy that you play with and really explore. So there were a lot of objects like this in the show. This was another one that was about like moire patterns and pixels and screens. So we just like made this like big wallpaper that could go up and like play with. I think there was like a spot rubbed out on the wall from people twirling it, which was good. Also talked a little bit about the modularity of letter forms, the fact that you can like reconfigure pieces into different letters. And so had this whole thing hanging from the ceiling where it would just serendipitously like make different letters just by floating. I think some of those fell down during the show, but but yeah, I guess Camilo, we haven't really talked about this, but like, what was your experience like wrangling this crazy show of all these toys that like kept on breaking all the time?
I think one of the, like, it helped me understand that your work, for instance, has this like theoretical approach to it, but also you find it's really important to do things yourself and, you know, like add this human element to production. So just the fact that some things would break weren't, you know, like, I feel that it was also part of this idea of sort of uncovering this black box and not like generating some transparency with the way things are produced and the way people interact with elements that appear to be seamless when they aren't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know like a school group would come through and then I'd get like an email that like, oh, you might want to like stop by. So I'd just like ride by on my bike. And then while the show was going on, I'd be like, all right, like let's weld that back together. And like, we're missing a tile now. Actually forgot what else we have in here. Okay. So the show eventually grew up and became a book, which is, there's 25,000 of them in the world now. And which is a very big print run, but like that's the type of print run you have to do to make a book like this even remotely affordable. And so the way the book is organized is from A to Z, and it asks that same question of like, how do letter forms get their shape? Like, how did we end up with this like typographic diversity that we enjoy on our computer screens? You know, every time we open Microsoft Word or Google Docs, we have to make a choice about typeface. Like, where do those typefaces come from? So the book goes from A to Z, and every page like has a little bit of information about a different period of type history or typographic technology. And then it leads into these like longer essays that kind of, you know, if you're curious, you can dip into it. So I wasn't exactly sure if people were going to want to read the essays or not, but yeah, people have been emailing me and about, you know, how much they've enjoyed them or typos they found. So I think they are actually reading them, which is good. But same idea. Like this is, for example, this is the pop-up for the letter J, which is about phototypesetting. Which, has anyone used a phototypesetting machine? Has anyone phototyped? Oh wow, we have some. I think this is maybe the first group that anyone's ever raised their hand, and there are multiple. That's so exciting. So, you know, phototypesetting was a transitional technology between, you know, hot metal printing and computer type. It used a keyboard, and the operator would, type in the text, and then it would be projected through film onto photo paper. That photo paper would then be developed and put in a paste up, you know, so you have a magazine page, and you'd have your headline and your small text, your body copy, and it would be set through phototypesetting. And so, you know, I was thinking, like, how do I explain that technology and let people play with it in a pop-up book? And this is not a perfect typesetting machine, but you can at least turn to these different kind of psychedelic J's and project, these are Tone or Amelia, and project it onto the wall, and then, you know, add some filters and like make it sparkle. So it's also an excuse to talk a little bit about light projection in design in the psychedelic era, and this idea of like warping and distortion. And yeah, so it's like one thing to talk about like technologies that most people will never touch or feel, but I feel like it really like gets people involved in the story when you can actually play with it and like make something with it. So that's kind of the idea behind this book. But yeah, there's a lot of I don't know, pretty deeply nerdy technical subjects in here that are hopefully made like more accessible and more fun by virtue of them being like interactive. And I don't know, I feel like I studied art history in school, and so I deeply believe that like the way things are made carry the ideas and the philosophies of their maker, and that if you want to understand like why the world is the way it is, then you have to look at how things are made and understand how they're made. So yeah, that's pretty much why I made this project. And I'm not going to go through the whole book. So there are actually, let's go forward like one more. This is I'll leave it at this, and then we're going to have a conversation. Then we can switch over to Q&A. But yeah, this is an example of like how the essay pages are laid out. And what I did, because I am a Rezo addict also, I ended up with all of this historical research where some photos were like super low res, and then some were like these like beautiful scans. Everything was from different time periods. And I was like, all of this needs to look the same in my book, or it's going to drive me crazy as a graphic designer. And so I took all of the images and diagrams and printed them out in a duotone color scheme, different duotone for like each letter of the alphabet that like corresponds to the coloration of the pop-up. So it's all color coded. My editor was like, that's overkill, Kelly. Like, it's already like A. We know that SAA goes with thing A, but I was like, no, it needs to be color coded too. I'm a completist. So, yeah. So that's what I mean. This is like eaten up like 5 years of my life. So we spent a lot of time together working on the show things.
So what would you say is like what happened between the exhibition and the book? And, I mean, I know that a lot of hiccups, but like I'm really asking about like what did you get out of the exhibition, and what did you learn, and how did that influence the final version of the book?
Yeah, well, I mean, one really good thing is I kind of got to write a rough draft for a lot of the text, which if you're a visual person, you really need like 52 drafts of anything before it like is good. So, just like going through that process, having people look at it, like give me feedback, interact with it was really useful. But I was also, just kind of going off my best guesses of like what would be a good way to demonstrate like different concepts, and then actually being able to like hide in a corner and like see people interact with things in the space and be like, okay, I can see what's going on there or not going on there. And then I knew how to better like present it or give instructions like in the actual book. So it wasn't like the training wheels version of it by any means, but you can also like do a lot more when you're in a physical space and can use any material. Like books are, I don't want to say books are limited, but it's like when you're working with just paper, there's like you can't make that anti-aliasing table. So I had to like kind of find other solutions.
And you've made several books, and they're all in a way interactive, and they're all expand the idea of what a book can be. Why are you always going back to books then?
Well, I mean, I think that books are such an elegant format because, it's there's so much knowledge compressed into this small space that like I don't know, there's something about like the theatricality of it and like the wonder of it that like I can like take this thing that I can just like grab off the library shelf, put it in my tote bag, and then when I open it on the subway, like I can be like ushered into this whole other world. And like I've always felt this way. And it doesn't have to be a pop-up book, but I just think that books are. I mean, there's literally a bookstore called Books Are Magic, but I think that they really are, and I think also that like impulse to like really, reach out across like time and space and take something that you're thinking and feeling and have someone else like experience it and be there with you is, I think, one of like the more like generous and beautiful things that humans do. And I think I just see an opportunity in the way that my brain works as a designer to, you know, structure an experience for like learning, you know, like I feel like as a designer, it's kind of like being a designer is almost like this like really intense level of empathy when you're like, okay, you're looking at it and you're like, okay, I love this, but let's pretend I'm someone else. And I just like walked into this, like, what would I see first, second, and third? And you have to kind of like structure an experience, like a layout to choreograph someone's vision across a composition. So, you know, I think taking that to another level and say like, okay, like, what if I come to this and I have no interest in type, or I have no clue what phototypesetting is? Like, how do I like meet that person where they are and like drag them down my rabbit hole and never let them go?
So that idea of theatrical, of the book unfolding and having that interaction, makes me think that letter forms here are also performed. Do you like? And in your text, you're saying that a letter form is a mixture of, or has elements of technology and culture. So when you're testing or trying out a letter form, beyond just working, technologically, how, like, when do you know it's also conveying something else?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly like the answer is I don't know, but I can, you know, look at like what I'm feeling and experiencing with it and assume that, you know, I am not the tip of an iceberg there. But yeah, I think like I'm really like I spent a lot of time. I think like the main challenge with making this book was to, you know, first organize everything I love about design and type design. So, you know, finding all of like the typefaces I wanted to feature, finding all of the bits of like typographic history and typographic technology that I thought were important to feature, and then figuring out like, all right, like what pop-up mechanism goes with this, you know, like what can explain this idea. So for example, actually we can go forward a couple slides. Let's go to C. The C turns into a D, and you know, the point of this is to demonstrate the modularity of letter forms, the fact that you can like remix the same shapes and get different letters. And you know, like how do you dramatize that? How do you show that in a pop-up book? And so this was like a way to like actually let the reader drive that transformation. And so it's something you're doing with your hands, but it also demonstrates this principle. The C to D is actually, it's gas pipe lettering. So it's a lettering style that came out of the trade of sign painting. And it's modular because when you're holding a brush with dripping paint, there's only like so many shapes you can make. And so there was a type style that came out of that where everything's either a straight line or a gas pipe, because that's like the radius of your wrist, like when you're painting. So, you know, it's like I can read about that and I'm like, well, you know, I think that there is some kind of physical metaphor that I can create in the pop-up book that will like demonstrate this idea. So I was always looking for things like that. And some of them, it's really spot on. And then other ones are kind of like, it's just like a really fun pop-up, you know? So it's like not like as much of like a didactic. I think R is like that. Like R is a really, really super fun pop-up and a really great essay. But it's about a shape. And so it's about a 2D shape. So there wasn't really like a mechanical 3D way that it needed to be explained. So I was like, this is an opportunity to just have fun and put in like one of like the fun kind of dancing baloney pop-ups that I want to make.
I don't know if anyone has questions, and maybe we can open.
Yeah, no, I would love it. Does anyone have any questions about this crazy project or the crazy exhibition?
I do have a mic that I'm going to bring around. I'm going to install you first.
Hi. It sounds like a lot of this book is really engaged with the sort of history of this format, and I'm curious if you made any interesting or surprising historical connections over the process of researching it.
Yeah, I think, but I don't know, like, if, okay, so I'm wary to like take credit for like any historical discoveries because so much of this book was about researching and pulling together like other people's research. And so, I did very little firsthand research except for interviewing type designers. So I talked to a lot of like living type designers, but in terms of like the historical context, I, was mostly like looking at like different people's accounts. But I was really inspired by David Reinford, who wrote A New Program for Graphic Design. If anyone's read that, it's really good. I was really inspired by the way that he followed his own interest, that he like trusted his intuition on like what should be in this like new telling of graphic design. And it didn't necessarily like hit you over the head with interpretation, but I kind of like let myself do that and just be curious. So for example, the letter R accompanies an essay that's about super elliptical type. And actually, if we could scoot forward to R just to like show some of those visuals, that would be great. We have to go through the whole alphabet, so um, but yeah, so like a super ellipse is a shape that it's almost like a circle that's trapped within a box. And there are a whole lot of like super elliptical type examples. Yeah, maybe stop, go back one. Yeah, that one, this is a good one. There's a whole lot of like tech manuals, like office products, like I don't know, lettering on rockets that use the super ellipse as the basis to create the shape. And so I was like curious about that. And I was like, why when I look at super elliptical type, do I have this feeling of like almost like technological nostalgia, like this Tomorrowland kind of idea of like what technology should be. And so I went down this rabbit hole about what is a super ellipse? Where did it come from? And it turns out that the super ellipse wasn't invented by, but was really like celebrated by, there was this recreational mathematician, which I didn't even know that was a thing. So it was a poet and recreational mathematician named Piet Hein, who was like very active in like the late 1950s, early 1960s. And there was this competition to design a roundabout in Stockholm. And all of the other submissions that this, traffic committee got were probably like very practical. But Piet Hein wrote this like very poetic, plea that like, throughout human history, we've had to deal with, squares where you have to like go out of your way to go around these corners, and also had the indignity of dealing with circles where, there's no start and end point. You don't know where you are. It's like totally disorienting. And what civilization needs is, a roundabout that is a super ellipse, like the most passionate thing that's ever been written about a roundabout, probably. But anyway, so he won, and this like super elliptical roundabout, it's called Circle Torgs. It's still in Stockholm. You can still drive around it and, feel oriented. But he went on to design like super elliptical plates, super elliptical like Jetsons. You think of the TV screen on that, like on a Jetsons episode or a Nam June Paik TV, super elliptical tables. He made a product called a super egg, which was like the 3D version of a super ellipse that would like, its features were like it could sit on its side or like roll. It was, completely pointless, but they're like $5,000 on First Dibs now. Anyway, you would think that like, okay, like by the force of this one man, this became like the shape that like typified like the mod, space race era, late 1950s, early 1960s. But there was also the fact that like we were just coming out of World War II and had kind of the first time in history we were able to, make industrialized, mass-produced products that were a LeMay curve, like the super ellipse, that were that sophisticated. So it really was this moment of like very, very concentrated technological optimism and showing off, like, look what we can do. We have this kind of precision. And so, when you look at this and you're like, oh, it feels like a rocket ship. It feels like science. It feels like, I don't know, like I can trust humanity to like solve my problems. I know that's a distant feeling right now, but but yeah, like where do those vibes come from? Like I'm feeling it, I don't believe it, but where does it come from? And it comes from that era where we were actually like at this like industrial production like apogee. And so, you know, I think things like that, I'm like connecting dots that I'm not sure anyone's connected before, but it all comes out of me like looking at this pile of like tech manuals from like the early 1980s where it's like COBOL, Atari, you know, like whatever. And like all of them have the same typeface. It's all that style. Like why? Like why? And it's because, you know, when you're frustrated with your early 1980s programming language that doesn't really work, like they want that little bit of tech optimism on the cover. So you reach to it, you're about to throw it across the room and you're like, oh, am I excited still? I don't know. so yeah. It was things like that where it's like more of like me responding to like my own sort of like aesthetic training as a graphic designer, where I'm kind of like a sponge and I'm just looking at the world and saying like, oh, what is this over here? So I connected those dots, but they're things that like you can't really prove that there's a connection there, but like I think it's evident, like if you, I don't know, live in the world and look at things. I don't know. I hope that answers your question.
Pop-up books are usually connected with younger audiences, and this feels, especially because it's a delicate object to manipulate, it feels like it's directed to an, you know, like learning for older audiences. Can you tell us a little bit about like this pedagogical approach in your practice?
Yeah, well, just from like the standpoint of raw capitalism, like, isn't that great that like adults think the book is for them and kids do too? So that's something. But also, like, I don't know, like adults like pop-up books. I like pop-up books. I feel like as long as you are a human being who has a body, that is going to be a way to like take in information, you know? Like, I think that, like, especially like as an artist, like I find myself like if I want to understand something, like I want to take it apart, like I want to push at things and prod at things. And so that tinkering impulse, I think, is something that I notice about myself, but I think is also like a good attribute. You know, like it's one thing to like get your information from, I don't know, authority, and then it's another thing to get your information from firsthand. And so I kind of want that side by side where people can like play with the thing and explore their world and kind of develop their own kind of like firsthand course of learning, as well as reading what the expert says in this like history account. So, and then also like the fact that it's a pop-up book, I think helps like lessen my authority as a historical expert, so I don't have that pressure of like making a graphic design history book. I mean, it is actually like pretty, like I tried to be comprehensive and span big periods of time, but no one's gonna like take it seriously to that degree that like I'm gonna get in trouble for including this or not that or whatever. I was just able to say, these are the things I love, these are the things that I think I have like real insight in, and then include them. So that was good.
Those of you of us who know you, like know that you did the research, did the design, produced the book, was there during the printing and assembling, and is also in some part distributing it. So like it's kind of a vertical integration of your of this activity. How does that work in terms of like in your artistic practice? Why do we see you riding a city bike with a bunch of books?
This happens all too often. If you see someone riding a city bike with a pile of books, that is me. Well, so the project actually, it didn't start as a completely DIY project. I was initially working with a publisher, and they approached me to make the book, actually, and we signed a contract. But it was like 3 years of them saying, okay, we'll get back to you next week. We'll get you feedback next week. And like, I don't know, like I waited for 3 years, which makes me feel kind of dumb. But eventually I was like, okay, I think I just need to make this. I mean, the thing is like, no one really knows how to make books like this. There isn't really a blueprint. There's not a publisher that you go to that like really knows how to make these. It's kind of the best case scenario is I have a direct line of communication and a very good relationship with my printer, and my printer's patient with me. And so I had that. And so I thought, well, if I can run a Kickstarter campaign and get funding for at least half of the cost of the production of the book, then I'm good. You know, I'll do that. And I was like, yeah, no problem. It's just $250,000. I can do this. And so, yeah, I actually made that on Kickstarter. And so I was like, all right, I guess we're doing this. And the book is actually, it's distributed by DAP Art Book, which they're completely wonderful. And my publisher that I broke up with had actually presented the book to them, and they were super excited about it. And so through a friend of a friend, reached out to them and said, hey, I'm alone now, but are you still interested in my book? And they're like, oh, yes, we want your book. And so I had their help in determining, like, how many books should I print and, you know, helping them get out into the world and make sure that, you know, they're not sitting in a warehouse forever. And so they brought my prototypes of the book to the Frankfurt Book Fair and showed it to booksellers there and showed it to Barnes & Noble. And we came up with the number for the print run, and then it was just a matter of getting it made. And so that's how we came up with 25,000. And I think we have like only like 7,000 left now. So like they've been moving, so that's good. Yeah, but it is weird being like, I am not a business person at all. And so I think if I was, I would have never like made a gamble like this. But yeah, I think that I definitely have like a lot of weird knowledge about making strange books. So if anyone in this room or anyone in the live stream is ever like thinking about making an ambitious book or has questions about like how do you find a printer or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to me, because I would love to like share what I have learned the hard way with anyone.
Yeah, we definitely have some more audience questions when I get to one over on this side. Hold on, just grab the mic so the live stream audience can hear you.
I have a question about, like, I guess you would call it like the state of typography today, because it seems like this book is kind of a genealogy of typography, and a lot of examples that you brought up had to do with, as you said, manuals from the 80s, or how this letter C, the specific font was kind of came about because of the way a
Sign painter, yeah.
sign painter would do. And it feels like logically that a lot of the history of type has to do with material and industrial process, and we're moving away from that. So I'm wondering, like, is typography now kind of, not to say like a lost art, but in the way that we need plumbers and we need electricians, but no one's learning to do it, so it's kind of like fewer and fewer people are doing it, so it's kind of like, I don't know, not like a secret society, but you know what I mean. It's like kind of like something that's like a very like limited knowledge. So I'm wondering, like, with this move to digital, as someone who knows the history of this, how has that changed the process of type fonts? And because it seems like the kind of constant theme that you've been bringing up is the essence, the issue of materiality and the typography coming out of the material. And since we're going into the digital, I'm wondering how that affects it.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And you know, the materiality of computers is actually dealt with like a lot of in this book. So like, for example, W deals almost completely with like pixels on screen and like the different types of like technology that has like helped maintain like the integrity of like those subtle differences between different letter forms on screen. But a lot of what we're talking about today with like digital technology is about AI and automation and like, you know, these processes that are supposed to unburden us, you know, theoretically, but make things like a little bit more black box. And there's this really long running thread through typographic history about the desire to make it less labor intensive, because it is so much work. Has anyone like hand set type and like printed on a letterpress? Okay, some people are raising their hand. So it's a lot of work, like spell your name. And so you have to find K, okay, E. You know, it takes a while. And that used to be how all newspapers were made. Every single newspaper, every single magazine, every single book had to be like set by hand. And so there was this like very intense drive to automate that process, in part because you had these giant, you know, labor unions that were very powerful, you know, that could shut down the newspaper, could shut down books, you know, could shut down everything. And so there was always like this kind of battle between like the managers and the workers. So that fueled the desire, you know, which is also fueling AI today. It's fueling the desire to like automate like a lot of these things. And so there's actually like, I know I'm on a tangent, but I'm going to come back. There's actually like a little passage in the book that's about this machine called the Page Compositor. I don't know if anyone's heard about this, but yeah, it was invented by and funded by Mark Twain. Mark Twain invested like a ton of like his fortune and his life's pursuit in making this machine that would like automate typesetting, and it totally failed. It was like one of these things. Astra Taylor has coined this term photomation. So it pretends to automate, but doesn't actually. It actually like hides this whole complexity. So the machine never worked, and Twain's biographer wrote that he lost his fortune and his good wit on this machine. So, you know, there are a lot of things like that, I think, happening also like with like, oh yeah, we can use AI to design typefaces. And it's like, yeah, it's not really, it isn't really working. But I feel like there is, to like answer your question, there is this sort of, you can't remove the human being from type design because it's about the quirks of our own perception. And so there's always going to be this level of handcraft and standing back and assessing it and, you know, kind of like honing things in that kind of, it makes it so it's like possible to automate some parts of the process, but other parts like have to be like tinkered with by hand. And there's definitely programs like Type at Cooper. So Cooper Union has this type design program that shows you how to design typefaces as a modern human who like wants to take advantage of like all the automation features on a computer, but also like do the craft of like crafting the typeface by hand. And yeah, a lot of the tools are like getting pretty smart. I feel like they're able to use AI for things like kerning, like the space between different letters, pretty effectively. And then also for like type hinting, like the arrangement of those like grayscale pixels that render a letter form shape as itself, they have to be remixed depending on how large that letter form is shown on screen. And so the arrangement of pixels and your allotment of pixels for like a 3 pixel high A is very different than a 30 pixel high A. And so type hinting is like kind of like a way of like building in like hints into like where the anti-aliasing should go, and things like that automation is like making better. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because like a lot of this book, actually the letter E, which is all about the Nordzeit cube, is kind of about how interesting it is that for years and years and years we had this like drawers of type mentality, you know, where you walk into like a letterpress shop, you can pull out a font. And our menu systems in Photoshop and Illustrator were like that, or, you know, Microsoft Word or anything that you would like go down the list. And it was almost like looking at drawers in a type shop that you could change it. And now that variable fonts have been adopted, now we think about type like more parametrically, or at least we're starting that. Like you could say, I want this typeface, and I don't want to see, extra light, regular, bold, extra bold. I want a slider, and I want to be able to interpolate between them. But that's actually like how type designers have always thought about typefaces. It's just that they, in past technologies, they had to make a choice and choose discrete steps along the way. So it's interesting because like a lot of things that are like futuristic or new technologies are actually looking back and realizing like the dreams of like earlier generations of type designers. And so it's funny how like history seems to like not be completely linear in that world of type design, which is interesting. I don't know if that answered your question at all, but yeah.
Offload things to the cloud. When we offload things to the cloud, like as you just said, like there's a physical process of learning, and this is making typefaces are used to be a very physical process, but somehow offboarding into AI somehow, like used to have a roommate who teaches at Brooklyn Tech, and they used to have computers in school. Now, starting last year, laptops aren't allowed in school anymore, and they're reading books again. And by not reading and physically writing, people don't know how to read and they don't know how to write. Aww. Or less than they used to. Yeah. So, but it's interesting. But you kind of like did answer it at the end, because what you said is that like people are realizing they have to kind of go back to the past to realize those things.
Yeah, and like, but actually, like, okay, so like some of the digital tools, a lot of the digital tools are like better than even like the analog tools. Like I think like most type designers were just like really, really excited like when Bezier curves came to Illustrator, because then you could make like mathematically like precise things. And so people had been trying to do that, with like different kinds of, materials and like ways in like the analog world. But yeah, there are like some concepts like calligraphy, like the thick and thin of like a calligraphy stroke. That is because you're holding the nib at a 45-degree angle, well, depending on the type of calligraphy you're doing. But, the fact that it's like thickness like catches in certain spots. And so a lot of like, type design that is digital is, looking at that contrast that's created by this almost like physical act, this physical palimpsest. But I mean, maybe it's like the circles I run in, but I feel like I know so many people who like do hand lettering and like typography and calligraphy these days, and I'm not sure why. It might be like a backlash against the digital stuff. I don't know. Do you have a lot of friends like that too?
I've met a few type designers, but yeah, I was actually when you were asking the question, I was actually thinking if maybe it's a process where of course there's not like as much of an offer of type designers, but there's still people who dedicate themselves to it. And depending on the project and enterprise, a type designer is really useful because they're gonna like really work on specific variations or design for type for a certain project. So I don't know, I'm thinking, for instance, in Colombia, many of the projects that are happening within exhibition design and like book design are carrying type designers to develop specific
typefaces for that exhibition.
For
that's
exhibitions,
so great.
For exhibitions and like cultural projects.
I feel like it's such a great way to like imbue like a project with branding in a way that's classy, because I feel like everyone's like angry about the logo all the time, right? But like people love like a custom typeface for a project, so that's great.
I want to see if we can squeeze in one more question. I think Lauren has somebody over here. Yes, perfect.
Hi. I'll try and make it quick since we're running out of time. But I'm really interested in your prototyping process. So when you're physically making the pop-ups yourself, when you're going from producing just one to producing the 25,000, how did you deal with mechanisms that were too complicated to actually physically produce in that quantity? And also, when you were doing the prototyping, were there any that just didn't work with the physical form of turning the page in the book?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to bother the person operating the keynote, if we like go forward to the end of the alphabet, I think I have some prototypes at the end. So we're just gonna like zoom through some of this stuff. So yeah, like if anyone has seen the book, like there's definitely like some pop-ups that keep going. Keep going. I think it's in here somewhere. Oh yeah, like this. Push play on that. So this was like an early version of the cover. I think this is the first time I got the A to turn into a Z, and I was so excited about this. I was like, this is great, like because I wanted the cover to look like a 7-segment display, because I'm really interested in like a lot of the book is about this like early like digital period, like that transition to the computational era. Because but yeah, this is me. I'm taking like a ton of videos like barefoot, like with like these like messy prototypes. But you know, all of these things were made in this like very kind of craft way. I think there might be more after this too, maybe. Oh yeah, there's good. This is the one that I really wanted R to be this. This was the first pop-up I designed was the R, also the O. These were the two that my printer said no. He also said no to the cover. And like it was yeah, actually let's watch this one again. Can you back up and show that R? I'm sad it doesn't exist in the world, so I'm just gonna show this video a million times. But yeah, so you can see how I made that like with marker, trying to figure out like how to turn all of these little ellipses into like a big super elliptical R. And you know, I usually start out prototyping just like by cutting paper out with, you know, by hand. And then I will refine it a bit and draw the lines in Illustrator, which is like a vector program. You can then send those vector lines to a cutter. So if has anyone used like a Cricut or like a laser cutter? Yeah. I think it's more and more common that like laser cutters are available in the world too. So those are great. Those are great for prototyping very precise things where you're like, I need a 1 millimeter hole or a 2 millimeter hole right in the center of this circle or it's not going to turn correctly. So, you know, I would do my best to like prototype things by hand, but then, you know, at a certain point, I need to send it off to my printer who's in Guangzhou. And so I would send him the digital file where there's a layer that's all my printed stuff, and then there's a layer with the cut lines, and then a layer with the fold lines. And so I'd send him that, but I would also send him like a big FedEx package of like all of these like messy paper prototypes, and you know everything has little Post-it notes all over it. It's, you know, it's crazy. But you know, like I think, you know, I was really lucky to find a printing partner who was really excited about the challenge and like trying to like work through like a lot of the difficulties. But at the same time, it's like working with a printer, because we worked together on this book. I think it was like 2 or 3 years of like hashing out issues and like coming upon the final format, getting the final print quantity, all of this stuff. And, you know, I think at some point it kind of becomes like a marriage where it's like a give and take, and he's given so much, and he's like, all right, we're going to do this. And I'm like, but I really want my R. And, but I really want the cover too. And I think, you know, we just came down to the wire where it's like, it has to go on press now. And I'm like, all right, here's an alternate for the R. Let me keep my cover. So yeah, there is, you know, just kind of like in any collaboration, it's kind of like bartering. But, you know, he would get back to me and say like, I think that like there's an issue with this, it's getting stuck. And then I'd look at it and be like, oh yeah, like when I rebuild that, like it needs more clearance there. Because sometimes when you're assembling pop-ups, you make these little adjustments to like fix things and make them work, and you forget that you did that, and they don't make it back into the digital file. So we were all kind of just like, you know, shaving a little thing off here, adjusting something here. And I was in China last month because I was teaching a paper engineering workshop for a graphic design magazine over there called Brandy. And I met up with my printer, and we kind of did like a post-mortem on the project. And we're like, all right, what are we happy with? What are we not happy with? And there's like so many little things where like we kind of had to make 25,000 of them to like learn like what we had to adjust for the mass production process. So hopefully we'll get to reprint, like a second edition and like address those things. And then I can fix all my little typos that people have been emailing me about too. They're the funniest, like most loving emails where people are like, I love your book. Also, this word should be, I'm like, oh gosh, where were you when I was editing it? Oh yeah, can we, no? Okay.
That's all the time we have. But Kelly, we would love if you would be able to sign some books. We have the book for sale back here. And if you could come back and sign. And then if anyone has any more questions, you can ask them back here.
Thank you all so much. This has been a great audience.